The dirt under Nora Matthews's fingernails had been there so long she'd forgotten what clean hands looked like, and as she stood in the mercantile on her 23rd birthday in August of 1872, watching a mother hand her daughter a peppermint stick, something inside her chest cracked open like a drought-dried riverbed. She turned away quickly, clutching the list her employer, Mrs. Henderson, had given her for supplies. Bonanza, Colorado, wasn't much of a town, just a scattered collection of wooden buildings nestled in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, but it was better than the orphanage in Kansas City where she'd grown up. At least here she had work as a hired girl, even if Mrs. Henderson treated her more like an indentured servant than an employee. At least here she had a roof over her head, even if it was the cramped attic room that leaked when it rained. "That everything, miss?" the shopkeeper asked, tallying up the flour, sugar, and coffee beans. "Yes, sir." Nora's voice came out quiet, the way it always did. 23 years of being told to be silent, to be grateful, to be invisible had worn her voice down to barely a whisper. She gathered the parcels and stepped out into the August heat, the mountain sun beating down on her faded calico dress. The walk back to the Henderson house took her past the saloon, the blacksmith, and the small church where she wasn't welcome because she couldn't afford to contribute to the collection plate. She'd learned long ago not to expect anything from anyone. Birthdays were just another day. Christmas was just another morning of waking before dawn to stoke the fires and prepare breakfast for people who would never think to give her even a kind word, let alone a gift. The packages grew heavy in her arms as she climbed the hill toward the two-story house where the Hendersons lived. Mr. Henderson owned the lumber mill, which made them practically royalty in a town like Bonanza. Mrs. Henderson never let Nora forget how fortunate she was to have this position, though Nora worked 16 hours a day for room, board, and $2 a month. She was halfway up the hill when she heard the commotion behind her. Turning, she saw a group of men outside the saloon pointing toward the mountains. Her arms were too full to shade her eyes, but she could make out a figure on horseback, descending one of the steep trails, leading a heavily laden pack mule behind him. "That's Vincent Drake," one of the men called out. "Hasn't been down from his cabin in near 6 months." Nora had heard of Vincent Drake. Everyone in Bonanza had heard of the mountain man who lived somewhere high in the peaks, who came down once or twice a year to trade furs and buy supplies before disappearing back into the wilderness. The stories about him varied. Some said he'd been a soldier who'd seen too much death. Others claimed he'd killed a man back east and was hiding from the law. A few whispered that he'd had a wife and child who'd died, and the grief had driven him to solitude. She didn't have time to stand and gawk. Mrs. Henderson would be furious if she dawdled. Nora continued up the hill, feeling the August sun burning the back of her neck through her bonnet. That evening, after she'd scrubbed the dinner dishes and swept the floors and carried water for Mrs. Henderson's bath, Nora finally climbed the narrow stairs to her attic room. Her back ached. Her hands were raw from lye soap. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to feel sorry for herself, which was all she ever permitted. 23 years old today. 23 years of never receiving a single gift, not even a kind word on the day she was born. The orphanage hadn't celebrated birthdays. They'd barely acknowledged names, and since leaving at 16, she'd worked in 4 different households, each one treating her as less than human. The Hendersons were actually the best of the lot, which was a depressing thought. She was unlacing her boots when she heard shouting from downstairs, male voices, angry and loud. Then, Mrs. Henderson's sharp tone cutting through. Nora crept to her door and opened it a crack. "I don't care what your business is, Mr. Drake. My husband isn't home, and I won't have strange men in my house after dark." "Madam, I'm looking to hire someone. Heard you might have a girl who works for you." The voice was deep, rough from disuse, with an edge that suggested he wasn't accustomed to arguing with people. Nora's heart began to pound. She shouldn't eavesdrop, but she couldn't help herself. Hire? For what purpose? Mrs. Henderson's suspicion dripped from every word. "I need someone to help me through the winter, cooking, mending, keeping the cabin. I can pay fair wages, $50 for the season." Nora nearly gasped. $50. That was more than she made in 2 years with the Hendersons. Absolutely not. The very suggestion is improper. A young woman living alone with a man in the mountains? I won't be party to such scandal. "I'm not asking for your blessing, madam. I'm asking if your girl would be interested in honest work for honest pay." If she is, I'd like to speak with her. If not, I'll try elsewhere." There was a long pause. Nora could almost hear Mrs. Henderson's mind working, calculating. Finally, the woman called out, "Nora, come down here at once." Nora's hands trembled as she descended the stairs. She'd never been called to the front parlor before. That room was for family and important guests, not for hired girls. When she entered, she saw Mrs. Henderson standing by the fireplace, her face pinched with disapproval. And there, filling the doorway with his broad shoulders, was Vincent Drake. He was massive. That was Nora's first thought, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed almost too wide for the doorframe. His hair was dark brown, nearly black, and hung past his collar, tied back with a leather cord. His face was weathered and tanned from years in the mountain sun, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of beard. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were a startling gray blue, like storm clouds over the peaks, and they looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy wool shirt, despite the August heat. His boots were worn but well made. Everything about him spoke of capability, of a man who could survive in conditions that would kill softer men. "This is Nora Matthews," Mrs. Henderson said, her tone making it clear she thought this entire conversation was beneath her. "Nora, this is Mr. Drake. He has a proposition for you, though I've already told him it's completely inappropriate." Vincent Drake stepped fully into the room, and Nora noticed he moved with surprising grace for such a large man. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Miss Matthews," he said, his voice gentler than it had been with Mrs. Henderson, "I'll be plain with you. I live up in the high country, about 2 hours' ride from here. My cabin is solid, weatherproof, and large enough for privacy. I need someone who can cook, mend, and help with basic chores through the winter months. I'm willing to pay $50 plus provide all meals in a private room. Come spring, I'll bring you back to town with your wages, and you can decide if you want to return for another season or find other work." Nora stared at him. Her mind was racing. $50. Private room. Meals provided. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Why what? Why do you need help? You've lived up there alone for years, haven't you?" Something flickered in those gray-blue eyes. Respect, maybe. "I injured my leg last winter. Broke it bad. Couldn't hunt for near 2 months. Came close to starving. I can hunt and trap just fine now, but I need someone who can keep the home fires burning while I'm out on the trap lines. Someone who can cook a decent meal and mend my gear so I don't have to waste time on it. I'm getting older, Miss Matthews. Time to admit I could use help." He didn't look old to Nora. He looked perhaps 30, maybe a few years older, strong and vital and utterly capable. "This is absurd," Mrs. Henderson interjected. "Nora, you can't seriously be considering this. Living alone with a man, you'd be ruined." "Seems to me," Vincent Drake said slowly, turning those intense eyes on Mrs. Henderson, "that a woman's reputation can't be ruined much more than being a hired girl with no family and no prospects. And seems to me that working for fair wages in an honest job is better than working 16 hours a day for next to nothing." He looked back at Nora. "But the choice is yours, Miss Matthews. I won't force you. If you're interested, I'll be staying at the boarding house tonight. You can give me your answer in the morning." He tipped his head in a gesture that was almost a bow, then turned and walked out. The house seemed smaller somehow without his presence filling it. Mrs. Henderson whirled on Nora the moment the door closed. "If you accept his offer, don't expect to have a position here when you return. And don't expect anyone in this town to treat you with respect. You'll be labeled a fallen woman." Nora looked at the older woman, at her thin-lipped disapproval and cold eyes. In that moment, something shifted inside her. What reputation did she have to protect? She was already nothing in this town. She was invisible, worthless, forgotten. At least in the mountains, she'd be earning real money. At least in the mountains, she'd have a chance at something different. I understand, madam," Nora said quietly. But she'd already made her decision. She barely slept that night. Her mind churned with possibilities and fears. What if Vincent Drake was dangerous? What if the stories about him were true? But then again, what if they weren't? What if this was her one chance to have something more than endless days of thankless labor? When dawn broke, Nora packed her few possessions into a canvas bag. She owned almost nothing: 3 dresses, 1 set of undergarments, a comb, and a small wooden box that had belonged to her mother. She'd never known her mother, who'd died giving birth to her, but the matron at the orphanage had given her the box when she turned 16 and left. Inside was a single ribbon, faded blue. She dressed in her best dress, which wasn't saying much, and braided her dark blonde hair. Her face in the small cracked mirror looked pale and nervous. Her eyes were brown, her features unremarkable. She'd never thought of herself as pretty. Pretty girls got adopted from the orphanage. Plain girls like her got hired out as servants. Mrs. Henderson was tight-lipped and furious when Nora came downstairs. "You're making a terrible mistake." "Maybe," Nora said, "but it's my mistake to make." She walked to the boarding house as the town was waking up. Vincent Drake was already outside, checking his horse and mule. When he saw her approaching with her bag, something in his stern expression softened. "You're sure about this?" he asked. Nora nodded. "I'm sure. It's hard living in the mountains, especially in winter. The snow can get deep. We might not see another soul for months, and the work isn't easy." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Drake." He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "Call me Vincent, and I'll call you Nora if that's all right with you. No point standing on formality when we'll be sharing a cabin." Heat rose to Nora's cheeks, but she nodded. Vincent helped her onto his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding, then swung up behind her. Nora had never been this close to a man before, and she was intensely aware of his solid presence at her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. They rode out of Bonanza as the sun climbed higher, following a trail that led up into the mountains. The town fell away behind them, and Nora felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was leaving everything she'd ever known, heading into the wilderness with a man who was essentially a stranger. But she'd never felt so alive. The trail grew steeper and narrower as they climbed. Pine trees towered around them, and the air grew cooler and thinner. Vincent guided the horse with easy confidence, clearly familiar with every twist and turn. They stopped once to let the animals drink from a clear mountain stream, and Vincent offered Nora water from his canteen and some dried meat from his pack. "You said you grew up in an orphanage," he said as they rested. It wasn't quite a question. "In Kansas City. Left when I was 16. "No family at all?" "None that I know of. My mother died when I was born. Never knew who my father was." Vincent was quiet for a moment, chewing on a piece of the dried meat. "That's hard," Nora shrugged. She'd learned not to feel sorry for herself about it. "What about you? The stories say you had a family once." His jaw tightened. "Stories say a lot of things. Most of them are wrong." He stood abruptly, brushing off his pants. "We should keep moving. Want to reach the cabin before dark." They rode on in silence. Nora didn't press him for more information. Whatever pain he was carrying, it was clear he wasn't ready to share it. The cabin appeared suddenly as they rounded a bend in the trail. It was larger than Nora had expected, built from solid logs with a stone chimney and a wide porch. Behind it, the mountain rose steeply, providing a natural windbreak. In front, the land sloped down through the trees, offering a view of the valley below. "It's beautiful," Nora breathed. Vincent helped her down from the horse. "It's home," he said simply. "Come on, I'll show you around." The inside of the cabin was one large main room with a sleeping loft above. There was a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and hooks on the walls for hanging tools and gear. Everything was neat and organized, though it had the barren feel of a place where no woman had lived for a very long time. "The loft is mine," Vincent said, pointing to the ladder leading up. "I cleared out the back room for you. It's small, but it has a real bed and a door that latches from the inside." He looked at her steadily. "I want you to feel safe here, Nora. I'm not going to touch you or bother you. This is a business arrangement, nothing more." Nora nodded, relief and something she couldn't quite name flooding through her. She followed him to a small room off the main area. It was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed and a chest of drawers, but it had a real door and a small window that looked out at the trees. It was more private space than she'd ever had in her life. "It's perfect," she said, setting down her bag. Vincent looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Get settled. I'll see to the animals and bring in some firewood." Figure we can have a simple supper tonight, and tomorrow you can tell me what supplies you need for proper cooking." That first evening was awkward as they figured out how to exist in the same space. Vincent was clearly unused to having another person around, and Nora was nervous about doing something wrong. But she made biscuits and gravy from the supplies in his pantry, and when Vincent took his first bite, his eyes widened. "This is good," he said, sounding surprised. "Thank you." Nora felt a small glow of pride. Cooking was one of the few things she was confident about. They ate in silence for a while. Then Vincent said, "I'll be straight with you about the routine. I check my trap lines 3 or 4 times a week, usually gone from dawn till mid-afternoon. I'll need you to keep the fire going, prepare meals, mend my gear, and help process any game I bring in. The work will get harder as winter comes on. Snow to shovel, extra wood to bring in, that sort of thing. But I'll handle the heavy labor. I just need you to manage the home front." "I can do that," Nora said. "I know you can. I asked around about you before I came to the Henderson house. People say you're a hard worker." He paused. "They also say Mrs. Henderson treats you poorly. That true?" Nora looked down at her plate. "She gives me work and a place to sleep." "That's not what I asked." She met his eyes. "Yes, it's true. But I've had worse positions." Vincent's jaw clenched. "Well, you won't be treated poorly here. You do your work, I'll do mine, and we'll both benefit from the arrangement." "Fair." "Fair," Nora agreed. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Vincent was up before dawn, checking his trap lines or hunting. Nora rose early too, stoking the fire, preparing breakfast and tidying the cabin. She mended his buckskin clothing, washed and hung furs to dry, and cooked meals that were far better than the hardtack and beans Vincent had been living on. September arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color to the aspens. Vincent brought home an elk, and they spent 2 days processing the meat, smoking some, and storing the rest in the cold cellar he'd dug into the hillside. It was hard work, but Nora found she didn't mind. There was something satisfying about working alongside someone who treated her like a partner rather than a servant. Vincent didn't talk much, but he wasn't unkind. He said please and thank you. He noticed when she did extra work and acknowledged it. He split extra firewood when he saw her struggling with the heavy logs. Small things, but they meant everything to someone who'd spent her whole life being invisible. One evening in late September, as they sat by the fire after supper, Vincent suddenly said, "When's your birthday?" Nora looked up from the sock she was darning. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Mine's in December. When's yours?" "August," she said quietly. "The 15th. Vincent's brow furrowed. "That was weeks ago, before you came up here." "Yes." "Did Mrs. Henderson do anything for it? Give you the day off at least?" Nora shook her head. "She didn't know. I never told her." "Why not?" "Because no one had ever cared before. Because she'd learned not to expect anything. Because hoping for acknowledgement only led to disappointment. But she didn't say any of that. She just shrugged." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's not right." Nora didn't respond. She focused on the sock in her hands, taking small, careful stitches. October brought the first real snowfall. Nora woke one morning to find everything covered in a white blanket. She stood on the porch, amazed by the transformation. The world looked clean and new, the ugly parts hidden under pristine snow. Vincent came up behind her, carrying an armload of firewood. "Pretty, isn't it? This is nothing, though. Wait till January. Snow will be up to the porch roof." "How do you get around?" "Snowshoes. I'll teach you how to use them. You'll need to know how to get to the woodshed in the cellar when it's deep." He was true to his word. Over the next few weeks, he taught her how to walk on snowshoes, how to read the weather by the clouds, how to tell which trees were safe to take shelter under and which might drop their snow load on her head. He taught her with patience, never making her feel stupid for not knowing things that were second nature to him. In return, Nora made the cabin more of a home. She fashioned curtains from an old blanket. She organized his supplies more efficiently. She cooked meals that made Vincent pause and savor every bite. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the awkwardness between them eased into something more comfortable. November arrived with fierce winds and heavy snows. Vincent's trap lines were productive, yielding beaver, mink, and fox pelts that Nora helped stretch and prepare. The work was messy and sometimes unpleasant, but she never complained. She was earning her $50, and more than that, she was earning Vincent's respect. One evening as they worked together scraping a beaver hide, Vincent said, "You're good at this. Most town women would turn up their nose at this kind of work." "I'm not most town women," Nora said, "and I've done worse. I cleaned chamber pots for 3 years at the Henderson house. This is at least productive." Vincent smiled, a rare expression that transformed his stern face. "I suppose that's one way to look at it." "Vincent," Nora said, emboldened by his good mood, "can I ask you something?" "You can ask. I might not answer." "Why did you really want someone to help you through the winter? I know you said you broke your leg last year, but you're fine now. You could manage on your own." Vincent's smile faded. He was quiet for so long Nora thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "I could manage, but there's a difference between surviving and living. I've been surviving up here for 8 years. Maybe it's time I tried living again." "What happened 8 years ago?" He set down the scraping tool and stared into the fire. "I had a wife, Martha. We were living in Denver. I was working as a carpenter. We were happy." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Nora could hear the pain underneath. "She got sick. Cholera. I watched her die over the course of a week. There wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. After that, I couldn't stand being around people, couldn't stand the noise and the crowds and the empty sympathy. So I came up here." "I'm sorry," Nora said softly. It was a long time ago." Vincent picked up the scraping tool again. "Anyway, that's why I'm here. What I learned is that being alone is easier than risking that kind of pain again, but it's also empty. So when I broke my leg last winter and thought I might die up here, I realized maybe complete solitude isn't the answer either. Maybe there's a middle ground." "Is that what I am? The middle ground?" He looked at her, his gray-blue eyes serious. "You're someone who works hard and doesn't complain and makes a damn fine pot of stew. That's more than enough." But as the weeks passed, Nora sensed that she was becoming more than just hired help to Vincent. She'd catch him watching her as she worked, his expression thoughtful. He'd remember small things she mentioned in passing, like how she'd never tasted maple syrup, and the next time he came back from checking his trap lines, he'd have a small jar he'd traded for at a distant trapper's camp. Little gestures that spoke of growing affection, even if neither of them acknowledged it. December arrived, and with it, bitter cold. The snow was now several feet deep, and they were effectively cut off from the outside world. But the cabin was warm and well-stocked, and Nora found she didn't mind the isolation. For the first time in her life, she felt almost content. On a morning in mid-December, Vincent came down from the loft and announced, "Today's my birthday." Nora looked up from the breakfast she was preparing. "How old?" 32. He poured himself coffee from the pot on the stove. "Not that it matters much up here. Days and years all run together after a while." Nora felt a pang of regret. She had nothing to give him, no way to mark the occasion. But then, inspiration struck. "Would you like something special for dinner? I could make a cake if we have the ingredients." Vincent's face softened. "That would be nice. It's been a long time since I had birthday cake." Nora spent the afternoon working on the cake, using precious sugar and dried eggs and some wild berry preserves they'd made in September. It wasn't fancy, but when she presented it to Vincent after dinner, he stared at it like she'd given him something priceless. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I wanted to. Everyone should have something special on their birthday." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "Thank you, Nora. This means more than you know." They shared the cake by firelight, and as Nora watched Vincent savor each bite, she realized with a start that she cared about this man, not just as an employer, but as a person. She cared about his happiness. She cared about the sadness that sometimes shadowed his eyes. She cared in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The winter deepened. January brought blizzards that lasted for days. Nora and Vincent were often confined to the cabin, but instead of feeling trapped, Nora felt strangely safe. The world outside might be howling and frozen, but inside, the fire burned warm and steady. They talked more during those long winter evenings. Vincent told her about his childhood in Ohio, about learning carpentry from his father, about the dreams he had had before Martha's death. Nora shared stories about the orphanage, about the various families she'd worked for, about the small kindnesses she'd received from unexpected people. "You never talk about wanting more," Vincent observed one evening. "Don't you have dreams?" Nora considered the question. "I used to dream about having a family, a place to belong, but I learned early that dreams like that don't come true for girls like me. So I stopped dreaming and focused on surviving." "That's a lonely way to live." "Says the man who hid in the mountains for 8 years, Nora replied, but there was no sting in her words. Vincent huffed a laugh. "Fair point." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You belong here, you know, in this cabin. You're not just hired help, Nora. You're the reason this place feels like a home again." Nora's heart stuttered. "Vincent, I'm not saying anything more than that," he said quickly. "Just wanted you to know that you're valued. That's all." But it wasn't all. Nora could feel the shift between them, the way the air seemed to crackle with possibility. She'd catch Vincent looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. She'd find herself watching him as he worked, admiring the capable strength in his movements, the way his muscles flexed as he split wood or lifted heavy pelts. She was falling in love with him. The realization came one evening in early February, as she watched him read by firelight, his profile strong and handsome in the flickering glow. She was in love with this mountain man who had given her respect and safety and a place to belong, and the knowledge terrified her because she had no idea if he felt the same way. February brought a brief warm spell that melted the top layer of snow. Vincent decided to make a trip to a distant trading post to sell some of his furs and restock a few supplies. He'd be gone for 3 days, he told Nora, and he made sure she had everything she needed before he left. "You'll be all right?" he asked, concern evident in his eyes. "I'll be fine. I know how to keep the fire going and handle the basics. Go do your trading." He hesitated, then reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. It was the first time he'd touched her beyond the practical necessities of their work, and Nora felt the warmth of his fingers like a brand on her skin. "I'll be back soon," he said, his voice rough. Those 3 days alone in the cabin were the longest of Nora's life. She'd grown so accustomed to Vincent's presence that his absence felt like a physical ache. She kept herself busy with chores, but every creak of the cabin made her heart jump, hoping it was him returning. When he finally did return on the evening of the 3rd day, Nora had to physically restrain herself from running to him. He looked tired and cold, but his face lit up when he saw her. "I'm back," he said unnecessarily, stamping snow from his boots. "I can see that. How was the trading?" "Good. Got a fair price for the furs." He pulled off his coat and moved to warm himself by the fire. "I picked up some things at the post, got coffee and sugar and some other supplies." He paused, then reached into his pack and pulled out a small wrapped bundle. "And I got this for you." Nora stared at the bundle. "For me?" "It's a little late, but I've been thinking about what you said, about never getting a birthday present." He held out the bundle. "This is for your last birthday. And I figure I'll give you one every year we're together. Everyone should get something on their birthday." Nora's hands trembled as she took the bundle. She unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful shawl, soft wool in a deep blue color. It was finer than anything she'd ever owned. "Vincent, I can't accept this. It must have cost. I wanted to give it to you." His eyes were intense on hers. "You've made this winter bearable, Nora, more than bearable. You've made this cabin a home. You've made me remember what it's like to care about something beyond just surviving. This is a small thing compared to all that." Tears stung Nora's eyes. No one's ever, she couldn't finish the sentence. No one had ever cared enough to give her a gift. No one had ever thought about her happiness. It was overwhelming. Vincent stepped closer. "Hey, don't cry. I didn't mean to upset you." "I'm not upset," Nora managed. I don't know what I am. Can I tell you what I think you are?" Vincent's voice was soft now, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I think you're brave and strong and kind. I think you're beautiful, even though you don't know it. I think you're the best thing that's happened to me in 8 years. And I think I'm falling in love with you." Nora's breath caught. "You are." "I've been fighting it," Vincent admitted. "Told myself it was wrong, that you were just my employee, that I was too old for you, that I had nothing to offer. But the truth is, these past few months with you have been the happiest I've been since Martha died. And when I was at that trading post, all I could think about was getting back here to you." "I love you too," Nora whispered. "I was afraid to say it, afraid you'd send me away." "I could never send you away." Vincent's thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a tear. "But I need you to be sure about this, Nora. Life up here is hard. I can't offer you fancy things or an easy life. All I can offer is this cabin, my protection, and a heart that's been broken before but is willing to risk it again for you." "That's everything I've ever wanted," Nora said. "I don't need fancy things. I just need someone to love me, someone to belong to." Vincent smiled, that rare transformative smile that made him even more handsome. "Then, we belong to each other." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Nora didn't want to pull away. She wanted this more than she'd ever wanted anything. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Nora had never been kissed before, but it felt right and natural, like coming home. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and he pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to marry you, Nora. Make it proper and legal. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Nora breathed. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married 2 weeks later. Vincent insisted on taking her down to Bonanza so they could be married by the minister, despite the difficulty of the journey in deep snow. Nora wore her new blue shawl over her best dress, and Vincent cleaned up better than she'd ever seen, his hair neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaven. The minister was surprised by the union, but agreed to perform the ceremony. A few curious townspeople attended, including Mrs. Henderson, who looked scandalized. But Nora didn't care. She spoke her vows, looking into Vincent's gray-blue eyes, and when he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she felt more like she belonged somewhere than ever before in her life. They stayed one night at the boarding house, and Vincent was nothing but gentle and patient with Nora, showing her what it meant to be loved by a good man. The next morning, they headed back up to the mountains, to their cabin, to begin their life together as husband and wife. March brought the first real signs of spring. The snow began to melt, revealing the brown earth beneath. Vincent's traplines were less productive now as the animals emerged from their winter dens, but he didn't seem to mind. He spent more time at the cabin, teaching Nora how to fish in the half-frozen streams, how to identify edible plants that would soon be sprouting. They worked together to plant a garden in a cleared area near the cabin, and Nora felt a deep satisfaction at the thought of growing food that they would harvest together. She was building something permanent, something that would last. For the first time in her life, she was thinking about the future, with hope instead of resignation. April brought rain that washed away the last of the snow. Vincent took Nora on long walks through the mountains, showing her the secret places he'd discovered over the years. They found a waterfall tucked into a hidden canyon, the water tumbling over rocks in a constant soothing roar. They discovered a meadow full of wildflowers, the colors so vivid they hardly seemed real. One evening, as they sat on the cabin porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vincent said, "I never thought I'd be this happy again." Nora leaned against his solid shoulder. "Neither did I. I never thought I'd be happy at all." "You deserve happiness, Nora. You deserve everything good." He wrapped his arm around her. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." May arrived with warm sunshine and the sound of bird song. Nora's garden sprouted, green shoots pushing up through the dark soil. She tended it carefully, amazed that she was creating something living. The vegetables they grew would feed them through the next winter. The work of her hands would sustain them. Vincent surprised her one morning by presenting her with a dress he'd bought from a traveling peddler who'd passed through the area. It was simple but new, a soft green color that brought out the gold in her brown eyes. "It's not your birthday yet," Nora said, confused. "I know, but I saw it and thought of you. Besides, I don't need to wait for your birthday to give you things. I can give you presents whenever I want." Nora laughed, a sound that was becoming more common. "You're going to spoil me." "That's the idea." Vincent pulled her close for a kiss. "You've never been spoiled a day in your life. It's my job to make up for lost time." June brought longer days and the need to prepare for the warm season. Vincent repaired the cabin's roof, replaced a cracked window pane, and reinforced the walls of the cold cellar. Nora helped where she could, and in the evenings they talked about their plans. "I'd like to expand the cabin," Vincent said one night. "Add another room or two, maybe build a proper barn for livestock." "Livestock?" Nora asked. "I've been thinking about getting some chickens, maybe a cow. Would be nice to have fresh eggs and milk." He looked at her carefully. "And if we're going to have children someday, we'll need more space." Nora's heart stuttered. Children. She'd never let herself think about that before, never let herself imagine a future where she had a family of her own. But now, sitting beside her husband in the warm June evening, it seemed not just possible, but probable. "I'd like that," she said softly. "All of it." July brought intense heat even at the high elevation. Vincent and Nora spent their days working on the cabin expansion, and though the work was hard, Nora loved every minute of it. They were building their future together, literally putting in the sweat and effort to create something lasting. In the evenings, they'd cool off in a nearby stream, laughing and splashing each other like children. Vincent was different now than he'd been when they first met. The hardness in his eyes had softened. He smiled more. He laughed. The isolation of grief had been replaced by the openness of love, and it transformed him. As August approached, Nora found herself thinking about her birthday. She'd never cared about it before, but this year was different. This year, she had Vincent. This year, she mattered to someone. On the morning of August 15th, Nora woke to find Vincent already up and gone from their bed. She could hear him moving around in the main room, and when she emerged, she found the table set with their best dishes. There was fresh biscuits, wild berry jam, eggs, and bacon. "Happy birthday, Nora," Vincent said, pulling out a chair for her. Tears immediately sprang to Nora's eyes. "You remembered." "Of course I remembered. It's the most important day of the year because it's the day you came into this world." He kissed the top of her head. "Sit down. I made breakfast." They ate together, and then Vincent led her outside. Behind the cabin, he'd set up a target and brought out a rifle. "I want to teach you to shoot," he said. "You should know how to protect yourself when I'm not here, and you should know how to hunt. Makes you less dependent on me." It was the most practical gift imaginable, but it meant everything to Nora. Vincent wasn't just giving her things, he was giving her skills, knowledge, independence. He was making her stronger. They spent the morning with the rifle, Vincent patient as he taught her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger gently. By afternoon, Nora was hitting the target more often than not, and Vincent's pride in her was evident. "You're a natural," he said, grinning. "Another few weeks of practice and you'll be a better shot than me." "I doubt that," Nora laughed, but she felt proud of herself too. She was learning, she was growing, she was becoming someone capable and strong. That evening, Vincent presented her with another gift. This time, it was a hand-carved wooden box, beautiful in its simplicity, with her initials carved into the lid. "For your treasures," he explained. "Everyone should have a place to keep things that are special to them." Nora opened the box and found her old ribbon inside, the one from her mother. Vincent must have found it in her room and transferred it to the new box. "Vincent, this is beautiful," she whispered. "How long did this take you to make?" "A few weeks. I worked on it when you were sleeping or busy with other things." He looked almost embarrassed. "I'm not much of a carver, but I wanted you to have something made just for you." Nora threw her arms around his neck. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This whole day is perfect." "Good," Vincent murmured into her hair. "Because you deserve perfect. You deserve everything, Nora, and I'm going to spend every day of our lives together trying to give it to you." That night, lying in their bed with Vincent's arms around her, Nora reflected on how much her life had changed in 1 year. Last August 15th, she'd been a lonely hired girl with no prospects and no hope. Now she was a wife, a partner, someone loved and valued. She had a home, a future, and a husband who made her feel cherished. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, his voice drowsy. "How happy I am. How grateful I am that you came to Bonanza last year." "I'm the grateful one. I was barely living before you came into my life. Now I feel alive again." He pulled her closer. "I love you, Nora Drake." "I love you too." September arrived with cooler temperatures and the beginning of the autumn colors. Nora and Vincent harvested vegetables from the garden, storing them carefully in the cold cellar. They worked together to prepare for the coming winter, cutting wood and smoking meat and mending gear. But this year was different from the last. This year, they worked as partners, as lovers, as husband and wife. This year, the cabin wasn't just a shelter, but a home. This year, Nora wasn't counting down the days until she could leave, but looking forward to a lifetime of seasons with the man she loved. In October, Vincent brought home a brace of rabbits from his hunting, and as Nora prepared them for dinner, she realized she felt unwell. She'd been tired lately, slightly nauseous in the mornings. Her monthly bleeding hadn't come when expected. She sat down heavily, her hand going to her stomach. Could she be pregnant? The possibility filled her with equal parts excitement and fear. She'd always wanted children, but she'd never imagined it would actually happen for her. That evening, she told Vincent her suspicion. His reaction was immediate and overwhelming. He swept her into his arms, laughing and spinning her around until she begged him to stop because she was dizzy. "We're going to have a baby?" he asked, his eyes bright with joy. "I think so. I'm not certain yet, but all the signs are there." Vincent set her down carefully, as if she were made of glass. "Then you need to take it easy. No more heavy lifting. I'll handle all the hard work from now on." "Vincent, I'm pregnant, not broken. I can still do my share." But Vincent was adamant, and over the following weeks he took over more and more of the physical labor. Nora found it both endearing and slightly frustrating. She appreciated his protectiveness, but she didn't want to be useless. As autumn progressed into winter, it became clear that Nora was indeed expecting. Her belly began to swell, and the morning sickness passed, leaving her with a healthy appetite and a strange contentment. She was creating life. After years of feeling purposeless, she was doing something miraculous. Vincent was transformed by the pregnancy. He doted on Nora, bringing her tea and cushions and treats from the supplies. He talked to her belly, telling their unborn child stories about the mountains and the animals and the life they would have together. He built a cradle in his spare time, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, carving protective symbols into the wood. "Do you want a boy or a girl?" Nora asked him one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "I don't care," Vincent said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely, that's all that matters." "What if it's a girl? Will you be disappointed?" "Disappointed? Nora, if we have a daughter who's half as strong and brave as you, I'll be the proudest father in Colorado." He kissed her gently. "And if we have a son, I'll teach him to respect women the way you deserve to be respected." December brought Vincent's 33rd birthday, and Nora made him another cake despite his protests that she shouldn't be on her feet so much. She was 7 months pregnant now, moving slowly but still insistent on maintaining her routines. "You take care of me all the time," she told him. "Let me take care of you for your birthday." They shared the cake by firelight, and Vincent gave her a gift even though it was his birthday, not hers. It was a pair of soft moccasins he'd made, sized to fit her swollen feet. "For when the baby comes and you're up at all hours," he explained, "they'll be warm and comfortable." Nora shook her head in amazement. "You're supposed to be receiving gifts, not giving them." "Making you comfortable is the best gift I could give myself," Vincent replied. January brought heavy snows and the knowledge that they wouldn't be able to get to town when Nora's time came. Vincent was nervous about delivering the baby himself, but Nora was strangely calm. She trusted Vincent completely. If anyone could help her through childbirth, it was the capable man who'd survived years alone in the mountains. "I've delivered foals and calves," Vincent said, clearly trying to convince himself as much as Nora. "How different can a baby be?" "Very different, I imagine," Nora said, amused, "but we'll figure it out together." February arrived, and with it, Nora's labor. It began in the early morning hours with a dull ache in her back. By noon, the contractions were regular and strong. Vincent, for all his worry, was calm and efficient when the moment came. He boiled water, prepared clean linens, and stayed by Nora's side through every contraction. The labor was long and hard. Nora lost track of time, focusing only on Vincent's steady voice, coaching her through each wave of pain. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, told her how strong she was, how proud of her he was. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day of labor, their child was born. Vincent caught the baby with steady hands, and when the infant let out a lusty cry, tears streamed down his face. "It's a boy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Nora, we have a son." Vincent cleaned and wrapped the baby, then placed him in Nora's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, at the shock of dark hair and the blue eyes that would probably turn gray like his father's, and felt her heart expand in a way she'd never imagined possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." "What should we name him?" Vincent asked, unable to take his eyes off his wife and son. They'd discussed names over the winter, but now that the baby was here, Nora knew exactly what she wanted to call him. "Samuel, after my father, whoever he was. I'd like our son to carry that name and make it mean something good." "Samuel Drake," Vincent said, testing it out. "I like it. Samuel Vincent Drake." They spent the next few days in a haze of exhaustion and joy. Vincent handled everything while Nora recovered from the birth, caring for the baby and his wife with a gentle competence that made Nora fall even more in love with him. He changed Samuel's clothes without complaint, walked the floor with him when he cried, and gazed at him with such wonder that Nora sometimes found herself crying from the sheer overwhelming beauty of it all. This was her family. This tiny cabin in the mountains held everything she'd ever wanted. A husband who loved her, a child who depended on her, a place where she belonged. March brought the first signs of spring again, and Samuel grew stronger and more alert. Vincent was besotted with his son, constantly holding him and talking to him. He built a sling so Nora could carry Samuel while she worked, and he made toys from carved wood and scraps of leather. "I never knew I could love someone so much," Vincent said one evening, watching Samuel sleep. "I love you more than life itself, Nora. And now we have this perfect little person who's part of both of us. It's overwhelming." "Good overwhelming?" Nora asked. "The best overwhelming." Vincent kissed her softly. "Thank you for giving me this family, for giving me a reason to live again." "You gave me the same thing," Nora replied. "You gave me a home and love and a future. You gave me everything I'd stopped believing I could have." April arrived with warm winds and blooming wildflowers. Nora slowly regained her strength, and they began to talk about the future again. Vincent wanted to expand their homestead, maybe get those chickens and a cow he'd mentioned. They talked about having more children, about building a legacy in these mountains. May brought a surprise visitor, a traveling minister who'd heard about the couple living in the high country and wanted to check on them. He was delighted to discover a healthy baby and expressed his willingness to baptize Samuel if they wished. "We'd like that," Nora said. "It would make it feel more official somehow, more real." They held a simple baptism ceremony on the cabin porch with the minister, the mountains, and God as witnesses. Samuel fussed through most of it, but when the minister blessed him, he suddenly quieted and looked around with wide, curious eyes. "He's a special child," the minister said, "raised in these mountains by two people who clearly love him. He'll grow up strong and capable." "He'll grow up knowing he's loved," Nora said firmly. "That's the most important thing." June and July passed in a blur of busy activity. They expanded the garden, built the chicken coop, and started work on a small barn. Samuel grew rapidly, becoming more interactive and alert. His eyes had indeed turned gray-blue like Vincent's, and his hair remained dark. He had Nora's smile, though, and her stubborn determination. As August approached, Nora realized it had been 2 years since she'd left Bonanza with Vincent, 2 years since she'd taken that leap of faith into the unknown. It seemed like a lifetime ago and yesterday all at once. On the morning of August 15th, Nora woke to find Vincent already up again, and once more the table was set for a special breakfast. But this time, Samuel was strapped to Vincent's chest in the sling, sleeping peacefully against his father's heartbeat. "Happy birthday, my love," Vincent said softly, so as not to wake the baby. "You remembered again," Nora said, though she shouldn't have been surprised. "I'll remember every year for the rest of our lives," Vincent promised. He set breakfast on the table with one hand, his other supporting Samuel. "And every year I'm going to give you something to celebrate the day you were born." After breakfast, Vincent presented her with his gift. This year, it was a beautiful quilt he'd somehow managed to sew in secret, made from scraps of fabric in various shades of blue and green. "For our bed," he explained. I wanted you to have something beautiful that you didn't have to make yourself for once." Nora ran her hands over the uneven stitches, seeing the love in every crooked seam. "It's wonderful. Vincent, how did you even learn to sew a quilt?" "I asked the minister's wife for instructions when he came in May. She gave me some fabric scraps, too. I've been working on it whenever you were napping or busy with Samuel." He looked embarrassed. "The stitches aren't very good." "They're perfect," Nora said firmly, "because you made them for me." That afternoon, they took Samuel on a walk to the waterfall, spreading a blanket on the soft grass and watching the water cascade down the rocks. Samuel was fascinated by the sound and the movement, his little hands reaching toward the spray. "This is the best birthday I've ever had," Nora said, leaning against Vincent's shoulder. "Better than last year." "Last year was amazing, but this year I have you and Samuel. I have everything." "You know what I love most?" Vincent asked, his arm around her. "Watching you be a mother, seeing you give Samuel all the love you never received. You're breaking the cycle, Nora. Our son will grow up knowing he's treasured. He'll never wonder if he matters." "And he'll have a father who teaches him how to be a good man," Nora added. "He'll learn from the best." August faded into September, and they began preparing for their second winter together. But this year was different because they had Samuel. Vincent was already talking about teaching his son to hunt and trap when he was older, about showing him every secret place in the mountains. "He'll be a mountain man like his father," Vincent said proudly. "Or maybe he'll want to be something else," Nora suggested, "a teacher or a merchant or a rancher." "As long as he's happy and honorable, I don't care what he chooses to be," Vincent said. "We'll support him no matter what." October brought the first real cold snap, and they moved indoors more often. Vincent had completed the expansion of the cabin, and now they had a proper bedroom for themselves and a small nursery for Samuel. The cabin felt like a real home, warm and lived in and full of love. One evening as they sat by the fire, Samuel asleep in his cradle nearby, Vincent said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I want to make a birthday tradition, not just for you, but for Samuel too. And any other children we might have. Every birthday, no matter how old they are, I want to give them something meaningful, a gift that shows they matter, that they're valued." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "You're giving them what I never had. I'm giving them what everyone deserves, and I'm making sure that in this family, no one ever doubts that they're loved." He reached over and took her hand. "You changed my life, Nora. You showed me that it's possible to heal from grief, to open your heart again, to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. I want our children to grow up knowing that kind of love and hope." "They will," Nora promised. "We'll make sure of it together." November and December passed peacefully. They celebrated Vincent's 34th birthday with another cake and the gift of new leather gloves Nora had made. Samuel was crawling now, getting into everything, keeping them busy and exhausted and delighted. January brought heavy snows again, but the cabin was warm and well stocked. They spent long evenings by the fire, Vincent reading aloud while Nora mended and Samuel played on a blanket at their feet. These were the moments Nora treasured most, the quiet domestic peace that she'd never dreamed could be hers. February brought Samuel's first birthday, and they celebrated with a small cake and wooden toys Vincent had carved. Samuel smashed cake into his face and hair, laughing with pure joy. And Nora and Vincent laughed with him. This was happiness. This was what life was supposed to be like. As spring arrived again, bringing with it the promise of warmth and new growth, Nora realized she was pregnant again. Vincent was overjoyed, immediately becoming even more protective than he'd been the first time. "We're expanding our family," he said, kissing her soundly. "Samuel's going to be a big brother." "Are you hoping for a daughter this time?" "I'm hoping for a healthy baby and a safe delivery for you. That's all I ever hope for." He rested his hand on her still flat belly. "But if it is a daughter, I hope she has your courage and your kind heart." The months passed in their familiar rhythm. Vincent worked his trap lines and hunted while Nora managed the home and cared for Samuel. Her pregnancy progressed normally, and by the time August arrived, she was 4 months along and starting to show. On the morning of her birthday, Vincent woke her with breakfast in bed, a nearly impossible feat in their rustic cabin. Samuel was already awake and playing quietly on the floor, occupied with his wooden blocks. "Happy birthday, Nora," Vincent said, setting the tray across her lap. 3 years of birthdays together, and I plan on giving you at least 50 more. "Only 50? Nora teased. "I'm planning on keeping you around much longer than that." After breakfast, Vincent presented her with his gift. This year, it was a beautifully crafted rocking chair, smooth and sturdy, perfect for nursing a baby or soothing a fussy child. "For when the new baby comes," Vincent explained. "I made it myself over the winter, wanted it to be perfect." Nora ran her hands over the smooth wood, touched beyond words. Every year, Vincent's gifts showed such thoughtfulness, such care. He didn't just give her things, he gave her tokens of his love, practical items that made her life easier and more beautiful. I love it," she said, sitting in the chair and rocking gently. "I love you." "I love you more than words can express," Vincent replied, kneeling beside the chair. "You've given me everything, Nora. A home, a son, another child on the way, and most importantly, a reason to wake up happy every morning. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," Nora said softly. "You deserve happiness too, Vincent. You deserve all the good things life can offer after everything you've been through." That afternoon, they had a small picnic by the stream, Samuel toddling around exploring while Vincent and Nora watched. The mountains rose around them, majestic and eternal, and Nora felt a profound sense of belonging. This was her place. These were her people. This was her life, hard-won and precious beyond measure. As September arrived, Nora found herself thinking about how much had changed in 3 years. She'd gone from a lonely, unloved hired girl to a wife and mother with another child on the way. She'd gone from having nothing to having everything that mattered. And it had all started with Vincent Drake walking into Mrs. Henderson's parlor and offering her a chance at something different. October brought brilliant autumn colors in the work of preparing for winter. Samuel was walking confidently now, following Vincent around and trying to help with chores. Vincent was endlessly patient with his son, teaching him to stack wood and feed the chickens, praising his efforts even when he made more work than he saved. "You're a good father," Nora told him one evening, watching Vincent show Samuel how to whittle safely with a blunt knife. "I'm trying to be. My father was a good man. I want to honor his memory by being the kind of father he was to me." Vincent looked up at her. "And you're an amazing mother. Samuel adores you." "He adores both of us. He's a lucky little boy." "We're the lucky ones," Vincent corrected. "We get to raise him. We get to shape who he becomes." November brought the first heavy snows, and December brought Vincent's 35th birthday. Nora was 7 months pregnant now, moving more slowly but still insistent on baking him a cake. Samuel helped by making a mess with flour and generally getting underfoot, but Vincent declared it the best birthday he'd ever had. "Next year we'll have 2 little helpers making a mess," he said, laughing as Samuel covered himself in cake frosting. January arrived with bitter cold, and Nora prepared for the birth. She wasn't as nervous this time, knowing what to expect and trusting in Vincent's ability to help her through it. Samuel was staying with them, too young to be sent away, so Vincent prepared him as best he could for what would happen. "Mama's going to have a baby," Vincent explained to the toddler. "There might be some loud noises, and Mama might cry a little, but it's all normal. The baby has to come out, and that's hard work." Samuel seemed to understand in his limited way. He patted Nora's belly and said, "Baby," with great seriousness, which made both parents smile. The labor began on a snowy February afternoon. This time, it was shorter and less intense, perhaps because Nora's body remembered what to do. Vincent was still calm and steady, coaching her through each contraction, and when their second child was born just after midnight, he announced with joy in his voice, "It's a girl, Nora. We have a daughter." The baby girl had a shock of blonde hair, lighter than either parent, and when she opened her eyes for the first time, they were brown like Nora's. She was tiny and perfect, and when Vincent placed her in Nora's arms, Nora felt that same overwhelming rush of love she'd felt with Samuel. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." "What should we name her?" Vincent asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand gentle on the baby's head. Nora had thought about this during her pregnancy. "Hope. I want to name her Hope because that's what you gave me when we met. Hope for a better life." Vincent's eyes misted. "Hope Martha Drake, after my first wife. Is that all right?" It's perfect, Nora said, understanding the healing that came from honoring the past while embracing the future. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly. Vincent supervised carefully, teaching his son to be gentle, and soon Samuel was saying, "Baby Hope." With the same seriousness, he said everything. The winter passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. Vincent helped with everything, never complaining, always supportive. He'd rock Hope when she fussed, walk the floor with her, sing to her in his rough voice. As spring arrived, bringing warmth and new growth, their little family settled into a new rhythm. Samuel was becoming more independent, and Hope was growing rapidly, her personality starting to emerge. She was calmer than Samuel had been, more content to observe before acting. "She's going to be thoughtful like you," Vincent told Nora. "And Samuel is energetic like I was as a child. They balance each other." April and May brought the work of planting and preparing for summer. Nora was fully recovered from Hope's birth, and she threw herself into managing their expanded homestead. They now had chickens, a cow, and a large garden. The mountain had become a true home, self-sufficient and productive. June brought a surprise. A young couple hiking through the area stopped at their cabin, lost and needing directions. Vincent helped them find their way, and the young wife looked around the cabin with wonder. "You've made such a beautiful life here," she said to Nora, watching Hope sleep in her cradle while Samuel played nearby. "So far from town, but it seems perfect." "It is perfect," Nora replied. "We have everything we need." After the couple left, Vincent said, "Do you ever miss town? The company of other women? The conveniences?" Nora considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I think it would be nice to have another woman to talk to, but then I look at what we have here, and I know I wouldn't trade it for anything. This is our kingdom, Vincent. These mountains, this cabin, our children. This is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible." July brought hot sunshine and the work of maintaining their homestead. Samuel was 2 now, talking in full sentences and constantly asking questions. Hope was beginning to crawl, getting into everything just as her brother had. As August approached again, Nora found herself anticipating her birthday with genuine excitement. She knew Vincent would have something planned, some way to show his love. 4 years of birthday presents now, 4 years of being valued and cherished. On the morning of August 15th, Nora woke to find Vincent had already taken the children outside so she could sleep late, a luxury she rarely enjoyed. When she emerged from the cabin, she found them all waiting on the porch, Vincent holding Hope, while Samuel stood beside him, grinning with excitement. "Happy birthday, Mama," Samuel shouted. Nora's heart melted. "Thank you, sweetheart." Vincent kissed her softly. "Happy birthday, my love. 4 years of celebrating the day you were born, and I'm just getting started." He'd prepared a special breakfast of all her favorite foods, and after they ate, he presented her with his gift. This year, it was a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of pencils. "For writing down your thoughts," Vincent explained, "and for recording Samuel and Hope's milestones. I thought you might like to document our life together, so when we're old, we can remember these precious days." Nora opened the journal to find that Vincent had already written on the first page. The story of Nora Drake, beloved wife and mother, who never received a birthday present until she married a mountain man who vowed to give her one every year for the rest of their lives. Tears streamed down Nora's face. "Vincent, this is beautiful." "You're beautiful," he replied. "Everything about you, everything you've done for our family. You deserve to have your story told." That afternoon, they took the children to their favorite meadow, spreading a blanket and watching the clouds drift by. Samuel chased butterflies while Hope sat on the blanket, grabbing at grass and flowers. Vincent and Nora sat close together, his arm around her, her head on his shoulder. "I never knew life could be this good," Nora said softly. "I never knew I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Vincent replied. "After Martha died, I thought happiness was impossible for me. But you showed me I was wrong. You showed me that it's possible to love again, to build again, to hope again." "We saved each other," Nora said. "You gave me a home and a family. I gave you a reason to live again. We're partners in every sense of the word." "And I'll be your partner for the rest of our lives," Vincent promised. "Through every birthday, every challenge, every joy. I'm with you until the end." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, they gathered their children and headed back to the cabin. Samuel walked between them, holding each parent's hand, while Vincent carried Hope. They were a family, bound by love and commitment and the life they'd built together in the mountains. That evening, after the children were asleep, Nora sat in her rocking chair with the journal Vincent had given her. She opened to the second page and began to write. Today is my 27th birthday, and it's the 4th birthday I've celebrated with Vincent. Before him, I never received a birthday present in my life. I was nobody, nothing, invisible to the world. But Vincent saw me. He chose me. He loved me. And he's given me a gift every year of our marriage, reminding me that I matter, that my life has value, that the day I was born is worth celebrating. But the real gift isn't the shawls or the boxes or the chairs or the journals. The real gift is the life we've built together. It's Samuel's laugh and Hope's smile. It's morning coffee on the porch and evening fires in the hearth. It's the security of knowing I'm loved and valued and home. I was born 27 years ago to a mother I never knew, into a world that didn't want me. But I was reborn 4 years ago when I climbed onto Vincent Drake's horse and rode up into these mountains. That was the day my real life began. That was the day I became Nora Drake, beloved wife and mother, woman with a future and a family and a place to belong. And every birthday from now until my last, Vincent will give me a present. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. Because he loves me. Because in his eyes, I'm worth celebrating. That's the greatest gift of all. The years continued to pass in their mountain home. Samuel grew tall and strong, learning everything Vincent could teach him about hunting and trapping and surviving in the wilderness. Hope grew thoughtful and observant, learning everything Nora could teach her about cooking and gardening and managing a home. And 3 years after Hope's birth, they welcomed another child, a son they named Thomas, who had Vincent's gray-blue eyes and Nora's light hair. Every August 15th, Vincent gave Nora a birthday present. Some years it was practical items like a new cookpot or warm winter boots. Other years it was purely sentimental, like a bouquet of wildflowers he'd hiked miles to collect or a poem he'd written expressing his love. But every year, without fail, he marked the day with a gift in the words, "Happy birthday, my love. I'm grateful for every year you've been in this world." And every year, Nora would thank him, but they both knew the words were insufficient to express what the gesture meant. Those birthday presents represented more than objects. They represented being seen, being valued, being loved. They were proof that her life mattered, that she wasn't forgotten or invisible anymore. As the children grew older, Vincent extended the tradition to them. Samuel received his first rifle on his 13th birthday, a rite of passage into young manhood. Hope received a locket on her 16th birthday with tiny portraits of the family inside. Thomas received hand-carved chess pieces on his 10th birthday, each one a work of art. Vincent taught his children that birthdays were important, that celebrating the people you love was essential. He taught them to be thoughtful with their gifts, to put care and attention into showing appreciation for one another. And they learned, because they'd grown up watching their father love their mother with such devotion. When Nora turned 40, Vincent gave her a rocking chair he'd built for the porch, larger and more comfortable than her old one. "For watching the grandchildren play," he said with a smile, even though Samuel, their oldest, was only 15 and years away from marriage. "Grandchildren?" Nora laughed. "You're planning pretty far ahead." "I'm planning for a long, happy life with you," Vincent replied. "I want to grow old beside you, Nora. I want to watch our children have children. I want 50 more birthdays with you and then 50 more after that." "That's impossible," Nora said, still laughing. "We'd be ancient." "Then I want as many as we're given. Every single one of them, I'll celebrate you." And he did. Every August 15th for the rest of their lives together, Vincent gave Nora a birthday present. Some were grand, some were simple, but all were given with love. And every year, Nora felt that same wonder and gratitude that someone cared enough to mark the day she was born. Samuel eventually married a young woman from Bonanza, a teacher named Elizabeth, who wasn't afraid of the hard life in the mountains. They built their own cabin a few miles from Vincent and Nora's, close enough to visit regularly but far enough for privacy. They gave Vincent and Nora 3 grandchildren who loved climbing the mountains with their grandfather and learning to cook with their grandmother. Hope married a traveling merchant who settled in Bonanza and opened a general store. She gave her parents 2 grandchildren and visited every summer, bringing supplies and news from the wider world. Thomas, their youngest, became a doctor, training in Denver before returning to Bonanza to serve the people of the high country. He married a nurse, and together they provided medical care to the scattered families who called the Colorado mountains home. They had 4 children who spent their summers running wild on their grandparents' mountain homestead. As Vincent and Nora aged, their children took over more of the hard physical labor, but the couple remained in their mountain cabin, the place where they'd built their life together. They'd expanded it over the years, added rooms and improvements, but the heart of it remained the same. The main room with its stone fireplace, the loft where Vincent had slept that first winter, the small bedroom where Nora had felt safe for the first time in her life. On Nora's 65th birthday, Vincent gave her a wooden box containing every birthday present he'd ever given her, or tokens representing them. The blue shawl, now worn soft, a scrap of fabric from the quilt, a flower pressed between pages of her journal, wood shavings from the rocking chair, decades of love preserved in small, tangible ways. "I wanted you to see it all together," Vincent said, his hair now silver, his face lined but still handsome. Every year, every gift, evidence of a life well loved. Nora looked at the collection, each item holding a memory, a moment, a piece of their story. "You kept all of this?" "Of course I did. These represent our life together. They're precious." "You're precious," Nora said, taking his weathered hand in hers. "You gave me everything, Vincent. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible." "You gave me the same," Vincent replied. "I was dead inside when you came into my life. You brought me back. You made me whole again." They sat together on the porch in their rocking chairs, watching the sunset over the mountains they'd called home for more than 40 years. Their grandchildren's laughter echoed from inside the cabin where the family had gathered for Nora's birthday celebration. The air smelled of pine and wildflowers and the cake Hope had baked that morning. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked. "Choosing this life? Coming up to the mountains with a stranger?" Nora didn't hesitate. "Never. Not for a single moment. This life, this family, this love. It's everything I never had and everything I always needed. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I had no worth. You loved me when I was unlovable." "You were never unlovable," Vincent said firmly. "You were always worthy, always valuable. The world just failed to recognize it. But you recognized it. You gave me my first birthday present and kept giving them year after year, reminding me that my existence matters. That's the greatest gift of all." Vincent pulled her close, and they sat together watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light. Behind them, their children and grandchildren celebrated, the cabin filled with warmth and love and life. This was the legacy they'd built together, a family rooted in love, commitment, and the simple truth that every person deserves to be celebrated. Vincent Drake, the mountain man who'd once hidden from the world, had found healing through loving Nora Matthews, the woman who'd never received a birthday present. Together, they'd created something beautiful and lasting, proving that it's never too late for happiness, never too late for love, never too late to build a life worth living. And every year, without fail, Vincent gave Nora a birthday present. Because she mattered. Because her life was worth celebrating. Because love, true love, shows up consistently and thoughtfully, marking the important moments and making the ordinary sacred. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nora leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for every birthday. Thank you for every gift. Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for saying yes," Vincent replied. "Thank you for taking a chance on a broken man living alone in the mountains. Thank you for building this life with me." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of home. Inside the cabin, their family laughed and celebrated, bound together by the love that Vincent and Nora had nurtured and protected for decades. This was happiness. This was home. This was a life well lived and a love worth celebrating. And tomorrow, Vincent would wake up and continue loving Nora with the same devotion he'd shown for more than 40 years. He'd find new ways to show his appreciation, new ways to make her feel valued. Because that's what love does. It shows up, it persists, it celebrates the beloved every single day, in small ways and large. But especially on birthdays, especially on that one day a year that marks the beloved's entrance into the world, especially then, love gives a gift that says, "I'm grateful you were born. I'm grateful you exist. I'm grateful you're mine." Vincent Drake had given Nora Matthews Drake that gift every single year of their marriage, and he'd continue giving it for every year they had left, reminding her with every present, every word, every gesture that she was loved, valued, cherished, and home. The mountain man and the woman who'd never had a birthday present had found each other and built a forever, and it was more beautiful than either of them had ever imagined possible.